Do you want to sit on the side? This is so funny. Well, it's my happy too, but like finding cool Rob list. Yeah. I just ruined my life.
How loud am I?
Okay, well, what's the issue? I thought you were just going to be fine. I don't know, I thought I didn't wear my glasses, so I was like a little scared. I was like, but I was in grade 9 and 10, I needed glasses. But I just like, didn't tell anyone. I was like, you know what, I'm actually able to see. I don't want to see it. Like, my favorite thing. First of all, like, anxious because I can't see it. And, she was just like, no, actually, not wearing glasses because like, I don't like when if it's dark, but like, I don't need to know what it's like. So I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
I was like, I can still hear. Exactly. My sister's name, I can see a little smell. It was just always the funniest thing because like people would be like smiling and I would just be like not there. Yeah, that's what I just can't. I can't tell who it is, but I'll just like write it down. I just people like very loud and say my name because like there have been times that they yell at me and I still it just doesn't register like oh I'm
All right, let's get going, I guess. The midterm is next Monday.
Oh my god. Okay. I was like, I swear it's not on Monday.
No, the midterm is not on Friday. The midterm is next Monday. So are we going to, I see how you read that now that we're going to talk about the midterm on Friday. We're going to talk about the midterm on Friday. Okay. Yeah, so yes. So my kind of current plan for Friday, so hopefully we'll get through education today. There's really not that much left. We might even end early, who knows. Friday's plan is sort of, I'll start with like kind of Q&A. You can ask any kind of questions you want, either in person or through the Slido. And then I will, grab some practice questions and just kind of walk through how you would answer them for the midterm. The midterm, which is on Monday. Okay. Hang on one sec. I'm just going to grab my slides here, and I'm going to put in a new slide. Okay. So, a couple of really, really kind of important things I just want to remind you. So, the test is Monday, and I believe that is the 3rd of February. Right? It's your birthday? Oh, okay, good. I'm like, all right, you're excused. No? Okay. All right, what was I saying? I don't even remember. Sorry, I'm really tired today for some reason. I cannot explain. It must be the weather. I think it's the weather. I blame the weather. My children, my life, my job. I got out of a faculty meeting on my phone a few minutes ago. It was terrible. No, the chair of the department? No. I'm the only one you know. I do everything. It's Dominique. Well, thank you. It's Dominique Clement. He's our chair this year for the next 5. Okay. Anyway, what am I talking about? Okay, so it is going to be 5 short answer questions. And trust me, it doesn't sound as bad as it is. No, it doesn't. It sounds worse than it is. It's not going to be that bad. That's what I mean. It's much, much less bad. It is so good. It's so good. It'll be so wonderful. That's what I meant. Wonderful. You will exit this exam and you will feel joy. No. Okay, I'm overselling a little bit. All right, I'm going to take those off. Okay, but there are 5 short answer questions. I'll go over kind of length and stuff on Friday, but you're not expected to write like Moby Dick or anything like that. Moby Dick's a long book, by the way. Just so you know, we're not talking a long book or anything. Really pretty short answers. Most of you probably have done some courses with me before, so you kind of know my style. It's open for 24 hours. So that day you don't have to come to class. So from midnight or 0000 hours to 11. What the actual hell has just happened there? Okay. Till 11:59 p.m. So you can write at any time. I will suggest that if you write after 9:30 p.m. and something goes wrong and you try to email me, your chances of getting a quick response go down exponentially because, I get up at 5 in the morning every day. So I am probably going to be in bed if my children permit this, which sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't. Right, so it's open for 24 hours. I know our class is 60 minutes, but I'll give you like 90 because I can do that. Don't tell anyone. 90 minutes to write, so you have a little bit more time. You don't have to pack quite so much in. You can start, and obviously if you have multipliers, right, so if you have accommodations, I'm just going to add those in to Canvas. And Canvas is so slick about this. I only have to do this once per semester now, and you'll get that multiplier. You can still write at home or wherever you want. So just you won't be able to write in here for if you have an extension or even for the 90 minutes, just because I have a class in here at 2 o'clock on Monday. So, that. But I'll give you 90 minutes. I doubt it will take you 90 minutes, honestly. Like most times I've given people 60 minutes and everything goes fine, but I'm feeling generous, I don't know, something or other. generous, if we will. And I think that's kind of it. It's really straightforward. The questions are going to be on, so history, concepts. Oh, not concepts. I'm sorry. Generations, right? This is what happens. I have 5 classes, and every other class other than this one has a section called Concepts and Theories. So I was just doing my questions for people in industry, the engineering class, and the great regret of my life agreeing to teach this again. Not because of the engineers, because of the textbook. It has no test bank, so I've had to copy and paste the multiple choice questions manually into Canvas, which has literally taken me a day to do for all the units, which is just honestly the slowest process I've ever done. And I wish there was some way for me to get ChatGPT to do this, but I haven't figured that out yet because I'm not smart. Okay, so history, generations, and education. So that should be fun for y'all. Okay, so 3 units. We're going to weight the questions pretty heavily to generations because we spent the most time on it. I have multiple kind of questions in the question bank. So, I think, I'm trying to remember, but I can't remember exactly how many because I haven't counted. But basically, you're going to get a random assortment of questions from each of these categories. So, no 2 people's exams should be exactly alike. So, if you're planning on cheating by sitting with your friends, forget about it. Also, I am going to test my questions again against ChatGPT. And now, what's the new one? DeepSeek. I'm going to download DeepSeek on an isolated device where I don't have to give the Chinese government all my information. And I'm going to test my questions on there as well. So be warned, I am deeply committed to making sure chatbots do nothing, or at least get a 3 out of 10. So, and we'll look at some questions on Friday. Any questions about that before I kind of jump into content? I know, am I talking about it on Friday? Yes, and also today. I know exam time is stressful. Just so you know, I also have 4 exams next week, but then I have to mark them. So, that's fun. Any questions? Anything? All right. Well, we'll talk on Friday. Feel pity for me, not yourselves. Oh, is it open book? Yes, it is open book. Oh, and you don't need to download Exam Lock, and I'm not going to be using the one that makes you talk about penguins. What is it called? SEM, right? They live in Antarctica, people. So, it's open book, yeah. So you can use your notes and all that stuff. It's good. It'll be fine. I have no constraints, and we'll see what the average. Are any questions from the readings? Oh, they're all from the readings. No, I'm kidding. Anywhere where there's overlap between the readings and the lecture, that's where the questions come from, right? My lectures are broadly based on the readings. But if the question is, are you going to take things that are in the readings that we didn't also talk about in class? No. I don't think that's fair. I don't do that. The point for me has never been to make students memorize a textbook. I don't find that. Is that a useful life skill, memorizing books? So okay, I'm leaning in on critical thinking, not so much memorize the books or texts. So yeah, their overlap, those are there to help you, to give you a richer sense of what's going on, but not for me to force you to read and memorize a textbook. So that's good. Or in this case, a bunch of chapters from books. Okay, shall we go? I don't want to sound despondent. I don't know why, I'm just really not feeling it today. Maybe because my first class was talking about globalization for engineers, and my tech wasn't working. I couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. Everything was broken, and it made me sad. Okay, let's go. So what were we talking about last time? We were talking about education, and we ended off, I think, talking about education and social class. And just kind of ended off with this kind of notion, right, that we're seeing an increasing class divide in terms of education, where, the children of educated parents, are college educated parents are themselves becoming college educated, and those whose parents are not college educated are increasingly not getting a college education and economically falling further and further behind. And again, when we talk about families, there's some interesting, statistics that we can talk about. There's so many statistics, I don't know how many you'll be able to bring in. Melissa Kearney's book especially is really, really interesting and has a lot of data, but she's an economist, so it's all very dry. But whatever, it's all really interesting. But just to say, right, we're seeing this increasing class divide where we see the education haves continuing to progress socially and the education have-nots tending to fall further and further behind. Okay. All right, this is pretty straightforward, right? So education and social class. So children from these higher SES backgrounds, right? Higher income backgrounds, they thrive in a whole bunch of ways. Okay, I will say one thing, because I'll mention this again when we talk about families. The higher your income, right, and the more educated you are, the more likely you are to come from a two-parent family. This is not universally true, but it is, about 80, I think like 82% of the time, if I remember the stats. So children from these higher income backgrounds do better on a ton of educational attainment and then economic attainment that follows from that kind of levels. So why is this, right? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So, I say here they tend to have better literacy rates. This is true. What really probably distinguishes them is, here, I'll put it here, it's parental resources. I'm pretty sure I spelled that wrong, but I don't care. Parental resources. So parents who are more educated tend to be richer, right? They are more likely to be married and remain married, which means that children from the homes of more educated parents have a ton of advantages, right? So Melissa Kearney, I've just been talking about her. Her book's really interesting. I can't wait to tell you more about it, so I'm not going to. Sorry. Her book is called The Two-Parent Privilege. There's a bunch of interviews, like if you want to jump the gun and hear what she has to say, there's a bunch of interviews with her on YouTube. I think she talked to like the two British comedian guys from Trigonometry, which was an interesting interview. It's a really interesting book, but basically the thesis is pretty simple. Having two parents in the home is a huge advantage. So for one, richer parents tend to be more engaged, and part of this is time, right? More likely to be married, more likely to be living together, right? Cohabitation does not seem, especially in the US, doesn't really seem to make up for this. So they're more likely to be living together, more likely to be married, which means they have more time because you can split domestic responsibilities, and Kearney puts this in very economist terms, right, into specialized tasks. So, mom is better with cooking and organizing the family schedule. Dad is better at, maintaining the cars and, driving the kids to sports practices and coaching. So you split those tasks around child rearing into specialist tasks. Maybe dad's better with helping with homework. Mom's better with bedtimes, whatever. They have more time to commit to children because they can split, their time amongst, between two people for parenting tasks. So they tend to be more engaged with their kids, right? Because it's not like you have to be on all the time. They don't get as exhausted as often because, when one parent is done, they can switch off with the other parent. So they tend to be more engaged. They have more money, right? 2 incomes is better than 1, and most households with 2 parents are 2 income at this point. They have more money, which means there's more enrichment, right? There's more, using that income to put kids in activities, give them tutoring if they need it, whatever it happens to be, right? If you're a big, stupid person like me, putting your kids in horseback riding lessons and then inevitably probably owning a horse somehow, I don't know. My daughter's pushing on that one pretty hard. her entire plan in life is to get me to buy a horse, even though I'm deathly allergic. So the horse isn't for me. So I'm not buying a horse. I'm resisting this one. Maybe a Mustang. That's the closest I want to get. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So more engaged, they have more time, more money. They can cultivate their children's interests, and just generally speaking, they're in a better position to support their kids, to help them with homework, to push education, right? So they're more engaged. They have more social capital, right? So I didn't talk about social capital in this class, did I? Okay, sorry. This is what happens. You teach too many classes. This is my engineering class again. I'm getting it mixed up. We're talking about board 0 and social capital. So social capital is kind of your networks, right? Social capital is your network of people. So you think of, always with social capital, I think it's not who you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? They have more people that can help their kids, people who they're connected with, that they can, ask to do something for their children, right? Get them an internship at a law firm or an engineering firm, or help them get that first job, right? They tend to be better connected to lots of people, partially because they have a little bit more time, right? Okay. And this one, these two I think we could class under cultural capital. We'll talk about these again when we get to religion. Okay, cultural capital. So what is cultural capital? Cultural capital is your ability to kind of navigate the world, present yourself in such a way that people are motivated to help you, right? So upper income parents tend to spend more time working with their children on how to interact with the adult world. And they tend to, in general, be part of more communities, right? More social institutions that give children a chance to interact with adults, to basically ask things of adults, build their ability to navigate adults, ask adults for things, and all that kind of stuff. So they build, more of that. And I said this already, they foster, qualities in their children. The children, I'm sure that sounds great on the live stream. You can't see my face as I'm exasperated with myself for tripping over my own tongue. They take whatever their kids are interested in, whatever qualities they find of value in their children, right? And they tend to foster and cultivate those, right? So think of a kind of Rousseauian vision of childhood that a lot of people have, right? Little Jenny has a good ear for music, so I'm gonna make her take music lessons. Little Jimmy looks like he's pretty good, he's pretty athletic, so I'm gonna put him in hockey and hope that he, makes the NHL, whatever it happens to be, right? Upper income parents have more of an ability to foster those things. And just think of it this way, right? Like think of hockey, right? Think of your average Canadian hockey parent and other garden variety psychopaths. Sorry, a little shot at hockey parents. I don't know why. My wife's cousin is a hardcore hockey parent, and going to her kids' games is like a terrifying experience. There's a lot of screaming. A lot of screaming. Once they hit her own kid, it's like, move your feet! It's like, holy shit. Just relax. Relax, lady. It's the kid. Anyway, he's very good. For some reason. It's fear. It's because of fear. But think of, something like hockey, right? Hockey is super expensive. It requires a bunch of things from parents. It requires equipment, right? A lot of equipment, expensive equipment that they grow out of really quickly. And increasingly, right, there's good equipment and bad equipment. Oh my God, I just looked at hockey sticks for no apparent reason. And I mean, when I was a kid, it was like the sticks were made of wood, and it's like, oh shit, you broke your stick. It was $12. Let's buy another one. The things are like $300 now. It's crazy. Yeah, I got my last hockey stick at Costco for $22, and I'm like, the blade's all shattered on it. I'm like, maybe a little more tape. Maybe a little more tape will do. I just play floor hockey. You have to drive, right? If you're a hockey parent, you have to drive everywhere. you have to take your kid, not only all around the city, but probably to tournaments in Timbuktu, or somewhere in the Northwest Territories or Phoenix or some, godforsaken rural town like Vegreville, or I don't know. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I'm teasing you, Erin. Erin is from Vegreville, so that's why I'm teasing her a little bit. Godforsaken giant Easter egg. But it requires a lot from parents, right? If you think your kid is going to be good at hockey, or even if they're just modestly good and you want it as like a pastime for them, it requires a ton of investment, right? Poor parents are not going to be able to make those kinds of investments. So their children will tend not to have their interests fostered. Any opportunities that might come from those interests, right, for scholarships or whatever, are going to never happen if you can't afford all of the equipment and all of that stuff. And that's the kind of relative advantages that things like wealth and having two parents give to kids. They're more able to take those advantage of those things. They get more support. They get more kind of social networks that give them that support, right? So I don't know what my diagram is here. Well, you can read it yourself. But the achievement gap starts young and continues through a child's education, right? And socioeconomic class plays a huge role in this, and increasingly that's tied to education. Just want to see, no questions. Okay. Okay, so I want to introduce you to a concept here. Credentialism. Credentialism is a nasty little word, but it's the way of the world. So I mean, we kind of talked about this a couple times already in the course, right? When we talked about Gen X, we've seen this chart before. This is from Jean Twenge's book. Why do people go to school now? And really from Gen X on, the story has been that you're going to university. Why? To get a degree. Why? To get a job. And why does it matter? You sometimes hear these arguments, right? Especially made by like people who are slightly opposed to the way the university and college system has been working in the last couple of decades, suggesting that it would be more beneficial for people just to go directly into the workforce, do almost like apprenticeships at law firms or places like engineering firms, rather than going and doing a 4-year university degree. What's happened is that the 4-year bachelor's degree has become the base credential, right? Your BA or bachelor's, let's say a bachelor's, is now equal to what the high school diploma was 40 years ago. The high school diploma used to get you into the base level of kind of middle class jobs. Today, the high school diploma really gets you stuck kind of in the service industry. And you need something like a post-secondary degree, mostly a bachelor's, although, obviously trades can also get you good paying jobs. I think the upper bound on trades is a little bit lower, but definitely you can do well in the trades. You're probably, unless you own your own, I don't know, don't ask me why I know these things. Unless you own your own business as a tradesperson, you're probably looking at an upper bound about $120,000 a year, which is good, still a lot of money. But the upper bound for someone with a bachelor's degree, depending on what it is, can be, 600-700 at a kind of upper bound typically. I'm not counting law because technically law is an undergraduate degree, but I don't count law because lawyers are different. It's 4 extra years of school, even though it's still considered a bachelor's degree. Okay, what am I ranting on about? Okay, so nothing. I'm not ranting. I'm lecturing. It's different. So increasingly what we have in terms of education is what's called credentialism, right? And what credentialism is that the bachelor's degree has been turned just into a credential, right? It has no kind of intrinsic meaning like it used to, right? It used to be that you went and got a bachelor's degree, and yes, it was an important credential, but it also demonstrated that you were a certain kind of cultured person, right? People did degrees in the liberal arts, so they would be a well-rounded person. And that still kind of exists, which is why you're like forced to take like an English lit class or something. But broadly speaking now, it's just like, let's pump out people from our degree factories so that employers know that you're not a moron. And I don't want to undersell it, but it's sort of like an IQ test and an endurance test. Can you follow instructions? Can you complete tasks? And are you basically intelligent enough to thrive in a university environment? And that's what this credential tells employers. Because for the most part, they don't actually care what your degree was in. And trust me, I lived this. I worked at a place coming out of university that demanded a post-secondary degree, even though the job could have literally been done by, I think, a chimpanzee. I'll tell you about that later. It's a fun story of trauma and darkness, and 3 wasted years of my life. But I get to lecture on it every year, so it's kind of fun. It's a basic skills test now, the degree. So it's a base credential, no longer about like bettering yourself or anything, right? It's not about ideas, it's just about money, and increasingly it's just about staying in the kind of contention to be in the middle class. Okay, I'm going to tell you something else you don't want to hear. Because I'm, for some reason, deeply honest. This has been something that, this phrase has been kind of kicking around the academy for a while. Okay. So the master's is the new bachelor's degree. So what the bachelor's degree used to get you 30 years ago, you now need a master's for, right? So again, right, you thought you were getting out at 22 and you're going to go get a nice job and move on with your life. Just wait, now you got to do a master's, so now you're going to be 24 or 25 if you do the victory lap, right? Okay, and this is really common now, and I will say, this is not like scientific. I'm being a bad sociologist. Bad. It's very anecdotal, but I can say that the number of requests for letters of reference to postgraduate programs that I have been getting in the last 4 years has absolutely jumped through the roof. And this year has been by far the worst. Even though last year I taught fewer students than the 2 years before. So the competition to get into master's program, we were just talking about this in our faculty meeting, and I should, of course, reveal to you all of our internal dialogues. But like our course-based MA, right, where we had 10 spots, 90 applicants, right? And that's just the course-based MA in sociology, right? So, other things like, what are some of the other ones? Social work, super competitive. Counseling, super competitive program. I know, I'm listing all the programs you've already been thinking about going into. I don't know. This is why I'm here, because I never figured that out, so I just stayed. I'm kidding. I love what I do. It's like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Let's just stay in the same university I did my bachelor's degree in forever. What an amazing plan. It's actually pretty good. I like it here. Except this room. It's unreasonably warm in here. But aside from that, it's all good. What's that?
I said those are you just listed the 3 jobs I thought, maybe I'll do that after.
Just be aware, the competition for spots in those programs is increasingly fierce, right? And so, again, I'll tell you our internal dialogue. We're saying that our entrance requirement for the course-based MA is 3.3. We haven't admitted anyone with lower than a 3.8 in the last 6 years. So, oh, Jenna just gives up. She just gives, I'm out of here. Okay, I don't mean to scare you. I'm just telling the truth as I understand it, which is what I try to do. We've definitely seen a growth of credentialism, and the new credential that employers want to see is a master's degree, right? That's the one that your audible side. That's the one that employers increasingly want to see, and more of the good jobs, right, require that. What's that? Well, you could get that with the bachelor's. You're fine. Yeah. Have a good time at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. It'll be fun. Okay. A call center. I had friends who worked at call centers. That was not a lot of fun either. Okay. So let's talk gender a little bit. How many slides do I have left? I'm just being funny today for no reason. Or terrifying. I don't know which. Terrifying, but with a smile. Okay. Gender. Particularly feminist scholars have long complained that early socialization and sex role stereotypes strongly affect women's career choices. Particularly the fact that women, despite lots and lots of programs, like you've heard about like Wisest, right? Maybe not. Wisest is a program that's basically been aimed to get more women into engineering, science, and technology. Despite these kinds of programs, women still overwhelmingly end up in kind of a couple of career paths. Teaching, nursing, social work, and other things connected to social work, right? So parole officer, these sorts of things, often, very women-centric. Now, feminist arguments is always that it's because women are trained from relatively young ages to be kind of, that girls are supposed to be compassionate, kind, and that it kind of, and not given kind of that spatial training, encouraged to do math and science, and therefore they end up in these careers. Now, we'll talk about what the actual statistics say, because the picture is a little bit different than what feminists kind of often argue. Young women often, continue to put a higher focus on marriage and family life than men, and they choose careers that match those expectations. Okay, I will say a couple of things here, because you've maybe heard, I'm sure you've heard this at some point, that women make kind of 70 cents on the dollar. I'm assuming you've all heard that at some point. So this is true, kind of. And the reason I say kind of, and this is often a complaint, right, that there's like a discount. Women get a discounted wage. So there's a couple of things that are typically true here. Okay, so the first one is the careers that women choose. Teaching, nursing, social work, and these ones. One of the differences between that and, say, STEM careers, engineering, technology, math, is these careers are not scalable. They're not scalable. So women tend to choose careers in things where there are sort of hard limits on how much you can do. And though I am attempting to prove this wrong, there's only so many people you can teach, right? If you're a teacher, you can't really be like, to increase my income, I'm going to teach 1,000 students this year. Most like primary, secondary school teachers, it's like you get a classroom of 40 people and your salary is negotiated with the government. So that has a strong effect. I realize I've been talking too long, but I'll tell you in a sec. Same thing with nursing, right? You can only treat so many patients. We tend to earn a salary. Same thing with social work. Whereas if you're in STEM, right? The potential for you to, say, develop an app that could make millions is a lot higher. Or to develop a technology or a patent on a drug or something, right? You could create all of these things that make you millions in ways that are just not possible in, these, pink collar types of careers. So both women are, the feminist argument that, women are discounted because they're put upon by society is kind of true and it kind of isn't. One of the other things that really contributes is more women choose these fields. Okay, is this my... I'm gonna tell you some other stuff. So I'm trying to remember. Oh, this is StatsCan. I was gonna say it was Sweden, but it's not. Okay, general trends. Back. General trends. One of the things we're seeing is more women are completing undergraduate degrees than men. And we'll talk about the crisis of boys, the so-called crisis of boys. We'll see if there's any basis to that later in the course. I'll talk about it a little bit here. But generally speaking, more women are completing undergraduate degrees than men, right? So more women are enrolling and more women are completing them. And you can see there's kind of wide variation by discipline. If we look, this is Canada. And what year was this? Oh, I don't think it's written on here. It doesn't matter. For some year, at some point in the past. I think this was 2022. So if we look at traditional STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, we see a pretty big kind of disparity between men and women in terms of who's enrolled in these programs. Traditional STEM plus healthcare, right? The gap is about the same. So if we add healthcare, so MDs in particular, math-intensive STEM programs, right? Way fewer women involved in math. So, engineering, computer programming, these things are much more male-dominated than female-dominated. Traditional, less math-intensive STEM. So, a lot of biology there. Not the biology of the people, like biology as a discipline. And then some of the less math-intensive STEM fields. You see women kind of just peeking ahead, right? So when you take math out of the equation, there you go. Non-STEM healthcare, predominantly dominated by women. So this would be nursing, right? Nursing is the big one here. Non-STEM business-related fields, men go into business and finance a little bit more. And then non-STEM other, hi, you are non-STEM other. And you see, women, basically you have this chart reversed, right? You have your traditional STEM is male-dominated, non-STEM is female-dominated. So, at least to some extent, some of these differences, in monetary achievement that feminists often talk about, is driven by the kinds of careers that women go into for whatever reason. Now, one of the things that's also true is that this is extremely stubborn. So, like I said, lots of programs have existed that try to get more women and girls interested in science. The best we've ever managed to do is for engineering, we'll take engineering as one discipline, is about 20%. So basically through the 80s and 90s, they really pushed women and girls to go into engineering as a career, and it started at like 8%, and they got it up to 20%, and then despite continuing efforts, it's gotten stuck at about 20%. So it's about 80% male, 20% female in most engineering programs in Canada. You can argue potentially that Canada is a less egalitarian society. But even in places that are considered extremely egalitarian, places like Sweden, Finland, Denmark, these differences persist. And in some cases, as the societies have gotten more egalitarian, basically, you kind of hit a point, where 20% of your engineers are women, and then it actually kind of reversed, right? It actually started to go down at one point, and the number of women in Sweden, I was looking at these numbers a little while ago, actually started to decline sometime in the 2010s. Fewer women, despite having more opportunities, were going into the sciences and continuing to go into those kind of more traditionally female disciplines, which has led some people to say it may be a strong kind of either social, cultural, or kind of gender-based preference for these kinds of careers that are driving women into them. Okay. Oh yeah, a larger percentage of women in Canada hold undergraduate degrees. Okay. So women now also earn more graduate degrees than men, but it's concentrated in social sciences, humanities, fine arts, education, and nursing. So if you reverse this and you look at the sciences, The STEM fields, it basically flips, right? So more men in all of our traditional STEM fields. Women still overwhelmingly enter these fields and do those for graduate degrees as well. Now, in some career paths, it's starting to roughly equal out. As of 2022, the proportion of female physicians, right, MDs, continues to rise, and it's basically today it's about just a little under half of family doctors are women in Canada. So that's getting very close to parity. And if we look at the people who are getting into med schools, they're now kind of 55% female. So eventually that number is probably going to kind of flip over as some older male doctors retire and they're replaced by younger female doctors. I suspect you'll see, family medicine at least becoming predominantly female. But it's just going to be it's going to be a close split. Okay, specialist physicians. So the ones that pay really, really well, right? Surgeons and dermatologists. And I just found out how much dermatologists make, and it's absurd. I have a friend who owns a dermatology clinic. He's like, yeah, the average dermatologist is making $2 to $8 million a year. And I'm like, for looking at people's skin? I guess that's important, right? I was like, okay, that's a lot of money. Yeah, so he owns the clinic, so he gets like 10% of that. So that's pretty good for just owning a building. 40.2%. So it's creeping up, but kind of slowly. Okay. 54% of physicians in Canada under the age of 40 are women. So yeah, by 2030, we should cross over that boundary. Okay. As of 2017, half of our law school graduates were women, and a little over half of the enrolled students are female. That said, by 2023, still only a little bit more than a quarter of law firm partners were women, and that number has not moved. It's moved up, but not a ton in 10 years, right? Okay, am I in my last 2 slides? I think I'm on my last 2 slides. Can I do 2 slides in 7 minutes? I can. Okay, so lots of arguments, and we'll revisit this later in the course, and we'll look at this argument a little bit, though it's a little bit older, so I'm probably going to go with Richard Reeves' book. I keep clicking that button. I don't want to click that button. Richard Reeves, and the book is Of Men and Boys. It's an interesting book, but we'll revisit that later in the term. So what's been true really since the 1990s? Boys are performing worse in school, right? And this is pretty consistent, and their performance is declining over time. All sorts of causes have been suggested for this as well. Everything from feminism to video games, pornography. We'll talk about what Mark Rigneris calls cheap sex later in the course. He suggests it probably has to do with this as well. But generally speaking, boys are doing worse. Now, if we look at men as a category, men are still outperforming women on the whole. However, if you take out the top 10% of men, right? So the top 10% of earners in terms of men, the remaining kind of proportion, women are doing better, like considerably better, especially at the entry level, right? Increasingly, when you graduate at 22, if you're female, you're likely to be making a little bit more than your male counterparts because you're a little bit more educated, right? And so you have more career paths in teaching, nursing, social work, or whatever you were planning on. Okay. College enrollment for young Americans has been gradually declining over the past decade. Again, this is driven by Gen Z being a small cohort. There's just less young people as a part of the population because, millennials, the fertility rate for millennials is something like 1.6 children per woman. And there's not, so basically what we have is just a really small Gen Z cohort. So Of that, though, in 2022, total number of college enrollments for 18 to 24-year-olds was down approximately 1.2 million. Most of this decline, though, is down to fewer men pursuing college. About 1 million fewer young men are in college compared to only 0.2 million fewer women. So there are less Gen Z young people, but of Gen Z, fewer men are entering college programs. And so if we look at kind of overall enrollment, right, men now make up 44% as of 2022. Sorry, I'm tripping over my tongue all over the place today. As of 2022, men are 44%, down 3% from where they were in 2011. So, and this number is widely expected to continue to go down as we see more and more young men sort of exiting life in a lot, not taking their lives, but exiting things like paid work, education, training of all kinds, and increasingly retreating into things like digital worlds, right? We'll talk about this later in the course. I keep telling you things you're going to learn later. I'm sorry. We'll talk about this when we get to Jonathan Haidt's book, where he talks quite a bit about this, and when we talk about Richard Reeve as well. But yeah, this is where, you know, if you hear an argument about like a crisis of men or the boy crisis of men and boys, this is where it's coming from. They're checking out of life because they're not doing this. Their economic prospects long-term are worse and worse. I mean, just again, we'll talk about families after, but for young women who might hope to one day find a reasonably compatible romantic partner at or above their socioeconomic standing, this is going to get increasingly harder. It was like, damn it, all the news is bad today. Single forever. You're a I just what does JD Vance call you, a cat lady, unemployed or unmarried cat lady? No, I'm kidding. But yeah, you know, because people tend to marry people of similar class or above, this is a real problem increasingly. And when we talk about marriage rates, one of the downward pressures on marriage is that, you know, women are finding it harder to find men that appeal to them from an economic standpoint. Part of this is women's upward economic mobility. Part of it is men's downward economic mobility. But you know, the old joke, I don't know if it's old, now it's kind of contemporary, that all the women that they interview on some of those terrible podcasts are looking for a guy who's 6 feet or above, makes 6 figures, has blue eyes and a trust fund. And you know, of those qualifications, the number of men in America that fit that description is precisely 3. You know, so there's a lot of women competing for those 3 guys. Or, you know, it's something like, you know, above 6 feet making 6 figures is something like 2% of the population in the US. So, you know, we'll talk about that later. That's just being funny now. Okay, there are questions. Before I let you go, let me see. I wanted to do the fact that they feel have a more structural advantage. That's an interesting question. I don't think so. We'll talk about status when we talk about marriage a little bit here as well. But I think it has to do with you need it to get ahead in the economy, and more men and boys are just kind of checking out of the economy in general, or comforting themselves in all sorts of things that aren't school, porn and all that stuff. What are the educational policies that presumably favor girls? One of the arguments has been that because women tend to teach, right, teachers tend to be women, they've created educational environments that favor women considerably, right, and female ways of learning. This is Leonard Sachs's argument in a book called Why Gender Matters, which is a really, really interesting book of why he thinks, you need to teach people according to their gender in ways that they're going to find interesting. And especially like teach girls physics, not by being like, when 2 race cars are barreling towards each other at 100 miles an hour, I don't know. Well, he wants to talk about Fibonacci sequences and other mathematical principles. But It's interesting. If men check out, how will the economy sustain itself? Well, that's a good question, which we will tackle as we go forward. Okay, we'll leave it there. I'm sorry, I'm nearly being depressing today.
No, literally people ask me all the time, like, oh, do you do this sociology degree? I'm like, I don't know, I think like social work, like, just, like, now what?
I mean, there are jobs in these
I
things.
thought nobody wanted those because it breeds burnout and it's horrible and mentally so draining. Like, I thought I would come and save the day.
Oh, that's also true.
Yeah.
Like the average, career span of a social worker is like 5 years.
Yeah, I see a roadkill and I cry. So I need to figure out how I would even go about having that career. But
you just need to stare at pictures of dead animals.
I don't know. I'd have 50 children. How do you go home and just turn off your brain and not think about how children are being beat?
I mean, I had one of my good friends. She did a social work degree in Prince George at UNBC. And she ended up, of all things, basically running the social services, child and protective services in the Yukon.
Oh.
So she was the deputy minister, and she lasted in that for about 4 years, and she completely burned out of it. And now she lives on a farm in Athabasca.
Which honestly, I'm okay with that too. So maybe I just commit 5 years of everything I have, and then I move to Athabasca. What does she do now for her career?
So she's a life coach, and she makes herbal. I'm sorry to clown on Vegreville. I just saw you there, and okay.
I feel like there's a pipeline from social worker to private therapist.
Yeah, she does some of that, and then she also makes herbal remedies in her giant garden on her farm. So, yeah. So, but at one point, she just disappeared, and I was like, "What the fuck happened to Pearl?" She just vanished completely, and then at some point she reemerged on social media, and she's like, "I'm doing this now," and I'm like,
Wow.
"What the hell happened?"
Yeah.
She's like, "I got divorced and burned out on my job," and
we literally had something. I work at an ice cream shop, and somebody's come. It's he's 35 and he was working there because he got burned out from doing social work. I'm like, oh well, I'm training to be you, so I guess I'll end up back here.
It's so necessary, but it is such a hard job.
Yeah.
You see people in really bad situations, especially kids, and I just can't imagine, right?
No. And I feel maybe if I was a stone cold but I'm the most empathetic person ever already. I'm crying with so I don't know. But it's okay because I won't even be able to get a job.
Yeah, that's right. You're gonna be living with your parents until you die, so it's all good. Oh, good. Hello.
I was just wondering, would you prefer if we make connections from outside?
Certainly can be helpful, but is not required. Right. So if you have something that you want to bring in from outside, I will say just be careful with it, because one of the things that I'm fighting is ChatGPT and chatbots, and sometimes outside knowledge can look a lot like chatbots, because chatbots also bring in really irrelevant things. So just, I would say, be careful with it. Probably try to stick closer to what's in the course. Just as
maybe drive conclusions from that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. I'll try to make them as specific as possible, so it's really, really hard to draw things from out of the course, right? But
ChatGPT is not really that helpful.
And yet I see a ton of it, right? So
then I also asked to count words. Couldn't even count words.
yeah, that one has confused me. Oh, thank you.
So yeah, kind of weird.
It is an odd thing.
Would you say the UFA is that scared about volunteering and stuff like that when you're trying to be law?
From what I've understood about law here, it's pretty much straight GPA and LSAT scores. Yeah, that's my understanding of the law program here, is very much just your GPA and your LSATs. Sorry, I'm all about the bad news today. Apparently, just
I can see that.
you'll never get a job.